The temperature that morning was -23. I know, because I checked my phone the second I heard the notification from the Ring doorbell 6:14 a.m., still dark outside, and the motion sensor had gone off on my front porch. I almost didn't get up. I thought it was a raccoon again, or maybe a delivery left early. But something made me grab my phone off the nightstand and pull up the live feed, and what I saw made my stomach drop straight through the floor. My mother was standing on my porch in her thin winter coat, the gray one, with the broken zipper she'd had for years, holding a single garbage bag in each hand. She wasn't ringing the bell, she wasn't knocking. She was just standing there, completely still, like she was waiting for permission to exist. I was out the door in 30 seconds. She looked up when she heard me, and the first thing she said, the very first thing was, "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I didn't know where else to go." She was shaking. Not just from the cold, the kind of shaking that comes from somewhere deeper than that. I brought her inside, sat her down on the couch, wrapped her in every blanket I owned, and made her tea. She had 2 garbage bags. That was everything. 2 garbage bags, and a small envelope she kept clutching in her lap, like it was the only thing she had left in the world. I didn't ask questions yet. I just held her hand and let her warm up. It wasn't until almost an hour later, when she'd stopped shaking and the color had come back into her face, that she told me what had happened. My brother had changed the locks. Let me give you the full picture, because you need to understand how we got here. My mother is 79 years old. She's sharper than most people half her age. Honestly, but about 2 years ago she was diagnosed with early-stage vascular dementia. It's slow-moving, and most days you'd never know anything was wrong. But there are hard days. Days where she gets confused, where she loses track of time, where she needs someone nearby just to feel safe. When the diagnosis came, my brother, I'll call him my brother because that's what he is. Biologically, even if he stopped acting like one a long time ago, he stepped up immediately. Said he wanted her to move in with him and his wife. Said it was the right thing to do. Said family takes care of family. I was living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Halifax at the time, working as a registered practical nurse and doing evening shifts 3 days a week. I didn't have the space. My brother had a 4-bedroom house in a suburb outside of Moncton and a wife who didn't work outside the home. It made sense on paper. I told myself it made sense. What I didn't know, what none of us talked about out loud, was that my mother owned her house outright. No mortgage. A modest place in Dartmouth that my father had paid off before he died, worth somewhere around $340,000 by current market value. She also had just over $90,000 in a TFSA and a GIC, plus her CPP and OAS payments coming in every month. My mother is not a wealthy woman, but she's not without resources either, and my brother knew exactly what those resources were. For the first several months, everything seemed fine. I drove up to visit every few weeks. My mother seemed comfortable. She had her own room, her cat, her routines. My brother's wife cooked dinner every night. I told myself I had worried for nothing. Then, I started noticing small things. The first time I visited, and my mother seemed genuinely confused about where her bank card was. She laughed it off, said she must have misplaced it. The second time, she mentioned casually that my brother had set up automatic payments for her, so she didn't have to worry about bills anymore. I asked if she still had access to her own account. She paused a moment too long before saying yes. The third visit, she asked me quietly, while my brother was outside, shoveling the driveway, if I knew why her bank statements weren't coming in the mail anymore. She said my brother told her they'd switched to paperless to save paper. But she'd never agreed to that, and she couldn't figure out how to check things online. I drove home that night with a feeling I couldn't shake. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. He was my brother. He had given up his guest room. He was doing something I couldn't do. But the feeling didn't go away. In January, I called my mother on her cell phone, the one I pay for, on my plan, and she told me she was fine, but seemed distracted. Then she said something that stopped my heart for a full second. She said, "I signed some papers last week. Your brother said it was about the house insurance. I don't really remember what they said." I asked her what papers. She said she wasn't sure. Just papers. He'd had them ready on the kitchen table, and she'd signed where he pointed. I hung up the phone and sat in my car in the parking lot of the Tim Hortons near my apartment for about 20 minutes. Then I called my brother. He was perfectly calm, told me not to worry, said it was just a power of attorney, so he could manage things more efficiently, since she was getting worse faster than expected. Said it was for her protection. Said I should be grateful someone was handling it because I clearly couldn't. I asked if I could see the documents. He said he'd send them over. He never did. That was the last time he answered my calls for 3 weeks. In February, I drove up unannounced on a Saturday morning. My mother answered the door herself, which surprised me. She looked well, but something was different in her eyes. She seemed smaller, somehow, quieter. She told me my brother and his wife were out grocery shopping and invited me in for tea. We sat at the kitchen table, and she showed me the envelope she'd been holding onto the one she'd had in her lap this morning on my porch. Inside was a single printed page. It was a notice from a real estate company, the house in Dartmouth, her house, the one my father had paid off, the one she'd lived in for 31 years, had been listed for sale. She hadn't been told it was being sold. She'd found the listing herself on her tablet, looking up the address after a neighbor texted her, asking if she was moving. I took a photo of the notice. I asked her if she'd signed anything about the house. She got very quiet and said she thought maybe she had, but she couldn't remember the specifics. She said my brother had told her it would be easier, that they'd put the money somewhere safe for her. I drove back to Halifax that afternoon. I didn't say anything to my brother. I just drove, and I thought, I want to be honest here, because I think a lot of people in my situation spend too long doubting themselves and giving people the benefit of the doubt long past the point where they should have acted. I doubted myself for months. He was my brother. My mother had seemed fine. The arrangement had seemed fine. I kept waiting for a cleaner sign, something more obvious, something I couldn't explain away. But there is no cleaner sign than your 79-year-old mother not knowing her childhood home has been listed for sale. The Monday after that visit, I called the Public Guardian and Trustee office in Nova Scotia. I want to explain this properly for anyone who doesn't know how this works, because one of the most common questions I got when I eventually shared some of this was, why didn't you just call the police? And the answer is, it's more complicated than that. When the harm is financial, and the person causing it is a family member who holds legal documents. The Public Guardian and Trustee is a provincial office that protects the interests of adults who may be vulnerable to abuse, including financial abuse by family members. They can investigate, they can intervene, and in serious cases, they can apply to the courts to have a power of attorney set aside or to have a guardian appointed. I filed a report. I gave them everything. I had the photo of the real estate notice, the timeline of my concerns, my mother's cell phone records showing the calls she'd made to me, the fact that she hadn't agreed to go paperless and had lost access to her own accounts. They told me an investigation would be opened. They told me to document everything and to stay in contact with my mother. I also called a lawyer, a real estate lawyer first, who confirmed that if my mother had signed anything under duress or without full understanding of what she was signing, there were grounds to challenge the transaction. Then I called a family law lawyer who specializes in elder law, a woman who had been practicing in Nova Scotia for over 20 years and who, when I finished explaining the situation to her, said very calmly, "This is financial elder abuse, and we're going to stop it." I want to tell you about the morning my brother found out I had called the PGT. He called me at 7 a.m. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. I let it go to voicemail again. The third time, I picked up. He was not calm this time. He said I was destroying the family. He said I was paranoid and ungrateful. He said I had no idea how hard it was to care for someone with dementia day in and day out, while I was living my life in Halifax. He said my mother was perfectly happy, and that I was the one causing her distress by getting lawyers involved. I didn't argue. I had learned by then that arguing with someone like that is like trying to drain a bathtub while the tap is still running. So I let him talk, and while he talked, I recorded the call. In Nova Scotia, it is legal to record a phone conversation that you are a participant in without notifying the other party. I am a careful person. I had started recording every call with my brother in February. He said a lot of things in that call, but the most important thing he said, the thing I have listened back to, probably 40 times since, was this. He said that the money from the house was going into an account that would benefit everyone, and that my mother had agreed to the arrangement. When I asked him which account, he went quiet. When I asked him if my mother had independent legal counsel when she signed the power of attorney, he went quiet again. Then he said I should mind my own business and hung up. 2 weeks after I filed the report with the public guardian and trustee, an investigator made contact with my brother directly. This is when things moved quickly. My mother, it turned out, had not had independent legal counsel. The power of attorney had been signed at the kitchen table, with only my brother and his wife present. There was no notary, there was no independent witness, who had confirmed her capacity to sign. Under Nova Scotia law, a power of attorney, signed without proper witnessing, and without evidence that the grantor had independent advice, particularly when the grantor has a documented cognitive condition, can be set aside by the court. The real estate sale, which had been 3 weeks from closing, was halted. The real estate lawyer received an urgent notice from the PGT. The buyer was informed. The listing came down. My mother's TFSA, I will not pretend, this didn't hurt to find out, had been drawn down by approximately $62,000 over the previous 14 months. The withdrawals had been made using the power of attorney. The money had gone into a joint account that my brother had opened in both his name and my mother's, but which my mother had no debit card or access to. This is elder financial abuse. It is a crime under the Criminal Code of Canada. It is also, unfortunately, something that happens in quiet houses in suburbs all across this country, and it mostly happens to people exactly like my mother, people who trust their children, who don't want to be a burden, who sign where they're told to sign and assume the people they love are looking after them. My brother was charged. I will not go into the full details of the charges because the matter is still before the courts, but I will tell you that the charges include fraud and breach of trust. He was not remanded into custody. He is out on bail conditions that prohibit him from having any contact with my mother or any access to her financial accounts. The power of attorney was set aside by the court within 6 weeks of my filing. An independent financial guardian was appointed for my mother while the recovery process is ongoing. My mother's lawyer, appointed through the process, is working to recover the funds that were withdrawn. It is not guaranteed. It is rarely guaranteed. But the process has started. My mother came to live with me in March. I moved out of my 1-bedroom apartment and into a 2-bedroom unit in the same building. My landlord is kind. My mother has her own room. Her cat, Pepper, who somehow survived all of this, has a favorite spot on the radiator by the window. I want to tell you about the day my mother asked me why I hadn't come sooner. We were sitting at my kitchen table. It was a Thursday evening. She was having a clear day, the good kind of clear, where she's quick and warm and funny the way she's always been. She was looking at a photo album she'd brought in one of her garbage bags, photos of our family from when my brother and I were young. She looked up and she said, "I knew something was wrong with the papers. I knew, but I kept thinking, he's my son. He wouldn't." I didn't know what to say. She said, "I kept hoping you'd come and tell me I was just being a confused old lady." I told her she was never confused about the things that mattered. I told her I was sorry I didn't move faster. I told her I should have trusted what I was seeing sooner. She patted my hand and said, "You came. That's enough. I have thought about that a lot since then." She said, "You came. Not you saved the house, or you stopped him, just you came." As if the most important thing, the only thing, was that she didn't end up invisible. I think about how many people there are like her. How many people are sitting in their children's houses right now, confused about where their bank statements went, signing papers they don't fully understand, too frightened to upset the arrangement, because they have nowhere else to go. The morning she arrived on my porch with her garbage bags, in -23-degree cold, my brother had told her she had to leave. He'd told her the house sale was closing soon, and she needed to figure out her living situation. He had not arranged for her to go anywhere. He had not called me. He had not called anyone. He had just changed the locks and left her 2 garbage bags on the step. She had taken a taxi to my building. She didn't have cash. He had the card, so she'd paid with the loose change she'd been collecting in a jar in her bedroom for years. She counted out exact change for a $40 cab fare in nickels and quarters and dimes, standing at the taxi window at 6 in the morning in -23. And then she walked up the path to my door and waited in the cold because she didn't want to wake me. If my Ring doorbell had not sent that notification, she might have stood out there until she frostbit her fingers, or until she sat down, or until something worse happened. I think about that a lot too. There are things I want you to take from this. If you're watching, and you have someone in your life, a parent, a grandparent, an aunt or uncle, who is aging and who depends on other people, stay in contact. Not just holiday calls. Regular, real contact, where you ask specific questions. Not, how are you? Can you show me your bank statement? Not, is everything okay? When did you last see your own account balance? If something feels wrong, it probably is. The feeling I had in the car outside Tim Hortons, that cold weight in my chest, I should have acted on that sooner. The people who exploit vulnerable family members are counting on you second-guessing yourself. They are counting on your love for your family, making you slow to act. Don't let that love be weaponized. Know your resources. In every province in Canada, there is a public office that handles adult protection. In Nova Scotia, it's the Public Guardian and Trustee. In Ontario, it's the Office of the Public Guardian and Trustee. In BC, it's the Public Guardian and Trustee of BC. These offices exist for exactly this reason. They are free to contact. They take reports seriously. And if you are a senior, or if you know a senior, there are also legal aid clinics that specialize in elder law, advocacy groups like the Canadian Centre for Elder Law, community legal assistance societies. These resources exist. They helped my mother. My brother called me once, about a month after he was charged, from a number I didn't recognize. I only know it was him because he left a voicemail. He said he hoped I was happy. He said I had destroyed the family. He said our mother would be better off if I'd never gotten involved. I did not call him back. My mother doesn't ask about him very often. When she does, she gets a certain look on her face, not angry, not sad exactly, just tired. The kind of tired that comes from loving someone who turned out not to deserve it. Some evenings, she sits at my kitchen table while I cook, and she talks about my father. She talks about the house in Dartmouth, the garden she kept for 20 years, the neighbors she misses. She talks about my brother when he was small, really small, before everything, and she smiles at those stories even though they hurt to hear. She is a good woman. She is a sharp woman. She was failed by people who should have protected her, and she held herself together with loose change in a jar and sheer dignity until someone finally opened the door. I am glad I opened the door. Last week, the Financial Guardian sent an update. The recovery proceeding for the $62,000 is moving forward. It will take time. It may not come back whole, but it is moving. My mother read the letter herself. She put it down on the table, looked out the window at Pepper on the radiator, and said, "Good." Just that. Good. I think that might be the most her thing she's ever said. If you are watching this and your gut is telling you something is wrong, I am telling you to trust it. Call the number, send the email, make the report. You are not being paranoid. You are not destroying the family. You are doing exactly what someone should have done, maybe years ago. You can be the person who comes.